everybody. Thank you for joining us for another one of our Two Beer Ideas online events. I've just been having a bit of a geek out, actually, but behind the scenes talking about the age of spatial computing and where we're going with some of this technology that we see out there at the moment. And it's obviously happening. It's obviously coming. And I feel really lucky to have today's speaker, Nevil, with us to talk through the session. As you can see, we're going to be talking about design for brands in the age of spatial computing. We're joined by Nevil. Nevil's a UI UX designer for XR and spatial computing. Been working in the industry for a long time, and having had a small sneak peek at the slides, I'm really looking forward to hearing from Nevil today. What I might do, Nevil, if it's okay with you, if I get you to turn your camera and your microphone on, come and join me on this virtual stage. How are you doing today, Nevil?
Yeah, sure. Good, thanks. Yeah, good. Great
stuff.
To hear. Thanks for the invite.
All prepared, ready for it?
Yeah.
Lovely stuff. Nevil's just seen me behind the scenes try to share a document and start a webinar, so he's not expecting a lot from me after that showing. So what I'll do, Nevil, I'll stop sharing my screen, which should bring it back for you to be able to share yours, and obviously tick for the sound as well. Right, again, sneak preview. We have some sound coming in Nevil's presentation as well.
Sure. Cheers. Thanks.
So yeah, looking good at this point. If you go into presentation mode. And
yeah, sure. So hopefully everybody can see that.
Yeah. So I'll leave you to it, Nevil. Just quickly to call out, if anyone does have any questions, please put them into the Q&A. The chat is open, but yeah, questions into the Q&A. I'll leave you now, Nevil, to deliver your session, and I'll catch you afterwards. Have a good session.
Cheers. Thanks very much. I'll just quick run through my deck. Yeah, my background is I started as a photographer years ago, back in the 80s and 90s. From that, when the internet came around, I got into being digital designer. More recently, I guess I've been doing UI UX design. And more recently, still, I've been doing sort of, design patterns and style guides. My last project, style guide I helped worked on, was the Elton John eyewear. But, what led me to VR AR, I guess, during lockdown, I sort of, got a bit sick of just working in the house by myself, sort of thing. And I was, I rang up a friend in New York, and she was an artist, and she was saying, "Oh, I'm getting really into NFTs," which I wasn't too sure what they were at the time. I was going back about 2-3 years ago, and she goes, "Oh, have you never heard of the metaverse? You should get into the metaverse." So, I had to kind of look around, and I thought, well, what is the metaverse? And I wasn't at the time, I wasn't particularly into blockchain or Bitcoin or gaming particularly. But I was very curious to know these 3D worlds, how they were going to be created, how they were going to be made. So, after a bit of digging around the internet, I've signed myself up for the VR and AR course. It's at MIT. Which, so I'll just quite quickly jump into, the differences between the technologies. I mean, VR is, obviously you're in a virtual world, so you've got your headset on, and, the real world is completely cut out, and you're in a separate world. Augmented reality is where it's an enhanced, you enhance the world with 3D content, largely, from the phone at this moment in time. But, there's obviously a lot of developments in glasses and stuff. And then mixed reality tries to combine the two. So you've got a headset, but you can see the outside world, and you can see the enhanced world. And, altogether, the umbrella term for all three of them is XR, which covers all three. Moving into the hardware, the two big rivals at the moment are sort of Meta and Apple. They both seem to be moving towards the mixed reality space of pass through. They're moving much more towards natural user controls, which is using your eyesight, using your hands rather than sort of having controllers. The Apple one looks just so impressive, just controlling things with your eyesight. It just looks pretty impressive. A lot of rumors about both Meta and Apple developing eyeglasses. I know Meta are partnering up with Ray-Ban. But you know, there's still pretty much at a basic sort of level at this moment in time. I mean, you know, hopefully, you know, it won't be too long before somebody produces a piece of hardware where people actually want to wear, rather than, you know, nobody's going to go down to shops with the latest Apple Vision Pro headset on their face. So, you know, until that time comes, you know, it's probably not that far away. Let's say a year or two. And you know, obviously, don't forget the, you know, in terms of their hardware, you know, the sort of the handset, you know, the telephone is still a piece of hardware. So, you know, moving on to the software, and there's just a huge, massive array of software. I mean, you know, I've just screen grabbed this list. This list, actually, I was going to animate it because it scrolls down about 3 or 4 pages of, and you know, that's changing every day. It doesn't even mention AI anymore. So, you know, a lot of the software still is in beta version, which is, it's kind of cool because you can kind of, you know, you can spot bugs and you can get back onto the creators of the software, and you know, they're very happy and supportive for your feedback. So that's, you know, it's been quite good to use actually. Yeah, I mean, you know, best to sort of categorize, or best to, if you think of learning the different types of software, it's best to probably think, well, what's my previous background? You know, do you come from a developer, predominantly developer background? Are you a UX designer rather than a sort of, you know, a graphic designer? So, you know, I've categorized them into, you know, into different sections. I'll say that, you know, I guess that you know, the real backbone of a virtual reality app is the game engine, which I didn't know at the time, but you know, obviously I know now. I've been kind of trying my best to kind of get my head around sort of being very competent in Unity, because Unity seems to be the most popular one around there. You know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, there is a couple of different drag and drop versions to simplify it. One of them is Metal Building Blocks. But there is a couple of, you know, in a year or two's time, I'm sure they'll really simplify it. Because at the moment, I mean, Unity uses C#, Unreal uses C++. You know, I've tried learning C#, and you know, I've had a little bit of success, and I've got a little bit sort of, I just thought, you know what, you know, I prefer to stick with graphics rather than some sort of full-on coding. So, so yeah, so that's the games engines. From a 3D content perspective, you know, you've got 3 different options really. You've got your traditional screen-based 3D software, which includes Maya. Blender's probably the most popular in the kind of XR community. You know, you can create, which I really enjoy, is creating 3D in 3D. So it's kind of sticking your headset on and creating 3D images or objects in, you know, with your headset. And, you know, Gravity Sketches, you know, I really love using Gravity Sketch. Quill and Tilt Brush from Google's pretty good too. And the third option is obviously just go out and buy it. You know, there's a Unity asset store which you can buy your 3D objects from. And, you know, there's Sketchfab and AI. I mean, AI is, you know, Bezier, there's a program called Bezier, they're starting to use AI 3D, which you can just, you know, it's on subscription basis, but, you know, it's still relatively cheap to use. Moving on to, you know, AR, you know, the best place to start with learning AR is, you know, SDKs, which is SnapLens, you know, After Effects, MetaSparks AR. Other softwares includes, you know, Adobe Aero, which I've used quite a bit. Still a little bit buggy, really, for Adobe product, but, you know, AR Toolkit, AR Kit from Apple's pretty good, and, you know, there's lots around. I mean, I think the most popular one around is Eighth Wall and A-Frame, which is, you know, it's a pretty stable platform compared to the other ones. It's still a little bit buggy. Yeah, so, you know, and the most used still at the moment, and it's probably the most popular, coming up for the most popular, is probably Web AR, which is you just use your browser to view the AR. You know, I suppose moving on to the UX side of things, I mean, there's kind of, you know, the huge difference between sort of UX for 2D and UX for spatial is, the biggest difference really is, you know, you get feedback from your headset. So, your headset's full of sensors. So it's a two-way street. It's not just, 2D is just static. Obviously you can interact by pressing a button, but it's very much just a one-way street. Whereas when you've got the headset on, it's you can move around. The headset needs to know where you are, where your face is pointing, what direction your movement is. So there's two different types of headsets. One of them is 3 degrees of freedom, which is the older headsets, which you can move yourself in 3 directions. Then the 6 degrees of freedom ones, which you can move around in 6 different versions. The fact that you can kind of interact in that way, or the sensors finding exactly where you are, is completely different. It throws the UX out completely compared to 2D. There's a lady called Dominic Wu who's just wrote a book on spatial design, breaking through from the 2D paradigm. She's mentioned 10 areas of UX. I mean, I could spend literally 2 or 3 hours just going through all these, but I've just highlighted them with 10 areas. One, you need to be obviously a lot more engaged with the user. Your app needs to be much more innovative. You want to be in a sort of it's a real new world, so you've got that scope. Diversity is a big thing with the XR community. Everybody wants to, they want to be very inclusive. There needs to be a lot more context because you're in a real, sort of a different reality. There needs to be the same context. So, if you could design an app, you want the grass to be green and the sky to be blue. And connections, it makes a big effort to sort of make connections with different various humans, so you can, collaborate. Doing stuff collaboratively is very important in UX, in XR. And comfort's a big aspect because, if you're constantly moving your head around, you're just going to get neck strain. So, these things all have to be taken into consideration. There's a big thing about, seasickness when you actually got your headset on, if things are moving around a bit too much. To reduce stuff, you need to make things really simple. There was a big thing back in the early days about, big famous book called Don't Make Me Think. That's very true in the XR. The more personalized the content is, the better. Obviously AI will have a big sort of say in that. And, it's important to get a lot more feedback. And then, it needs the space because you're enclosed, it needs to feel quite safe too. I know Dominic, I think she took a lot of this information from Microsoft's inclusive design principles, which are online. I mean, there's a link for them. If you're interested, you can kind of continue reading, get a lot more information from that. So moving on to the UI principles, obviously sizing of the areas and position is very important. Like I say, because of you need to have comfortable eyesight. You can't sort of constantly move your head around. So it's, it's very important to have comfort areas and not so comfort areas. So, you want your content to be targeted in the comfort area. You can see from here, once the content moves out of the comfort area, it needs to kind of have a slight curve to it. So when it's a little bit less effort to move your head around. The height's very important because you don't want to get neck strain. You kind of it has to be a certain distance from the ground, and you don't want to be really high straining your neck. Obviously there is kind of there is a lot of constraints by sort of putting in content in the right height. Spatial awareness is very important when you're designing UI. I mean, I've got a little video here from Shapes XR, which kind of explains a lot more than better than what I can. Yeah, so I'll just quickly pull it up.
Station. Hello up there. I wanted to introduce the concept of proxemics, or proxemics, as some call it. It is how our brains perceive other people relative to ourselves. And studies have shown that our brains kind of categorize these 4 distinct zones of the space around us it relates to other people. So in the closest space here, the intimate space is where your body is. So it's where, if someone gives you a hug, they're entering your intimate space. This is where you want to have the most protection. The next level out is your personal space. This is where you might have content that you're interacting with, other people that you're interacting with, or collaborating with closely. The next level out is social space, where I might be having a conversation with that person and with the others around me. We would expect everybody in this space to be able to see and hear each other quite well. And then beyond that is the public space. This is where the expectation is that everything out here that you can see, everybody can see. There's nothing as private that is in this social space. And the expectation is that if somebody is out in the social space, I might not be able to hear them. But if the two of us are close to each other, we'd be able to hear each other and have a conversation. So you can use this guideline, this template, as a guide for yourself to place content in social VR situations or even augmented reality if that's what you're working on. So yeah, that's it.
Right. So yeah. So
Hello up there. I wanted to introduce.
yeah. So what you didn't mention actually is audio is very important in that situation. Which is quite. A lot of the headsets come with very good top quality sort of stereo sound to it. So that makes the audio very important. So yeah, so there's a bit, like I said earlier about the hardware, there's a big sort of step towards natural user interfaces, which is using eye gaze, hand pinching, and voice recognition. Apple have used a system of what you need to bear in mind. They use a system which helps with eye tracking, which is depth of field, which you can almost make from that image, blurred out certain areas, so it tracks you out to the navigation. They've got good guidelines to sort of to producing their icons. They say to use rounded edges, just so your eye focuses in the center and gives the icons plenty of room to breathe within that sort of icon area. When it comes to using eyes, they use eyes to track things and to hover on them, then you use your fingers and hands to kind of to action that the areas that you've highlighted. And voice is mainly used for searches, really, to be honest, just for searches. Moving on to prototyping, obviously you've got various different types of prototyping. Here's just an example of lo-fi sketching prototyping, where you can just sketch something out. You can use various pieces of software to actually simulate that your sketches that actually what they look like in VR with a headset on, which is I mean, the thing with prototyping, to build the app in Unity or Unreal is so expensive that you don't want to go back and sort of completely change the design or the interaction of that app. So prototyping is much more important within the design process than it is, in sort of flat 2D design. So moving on to sort of high fidelity prototyping. I mean, there's a number of different softwares, but I think the best one for me is Shapes XR, which is brilliant because it's a bit like, sort of Minecraft in a way, but you can just kind of build out your sort of app. You can, it's got slight sort of interaction with it, so you can hover over elements, you can interact into different pages. You can import designs from Figma. You can export into Unity. You can obviously invite other users to sort of share the space so you can collaboratively work on a project, which is a fantastic step forward. I've used this thing called digital twin to make a prototype. I just done this over the weekend. I just went to my local area and I sort of, there's a kind of an old railway line which people used to graffiti on quite a bit. And I came up with this VR idea of sort of building 3D AR sort of objects within that sort of area. So basically, you can use your app to sort of take some photographs of it. It stitches all the photographs together, which gives you a 3D digital twin of that area. So once you've got that digital twin, which is, it's a free app, you can just create this sort of 3D object. You can import the object in this a program like Gravity Sketch or 3D Shapes XR, and then once you've got it in your Gravity Sketch app, you can just start mocking up 3D images for it. So you don't have to. Obviously, I don't have to take my headset down to the park just to sort of or wherever you're making the digital twin of, so you don't have to physically go down there. You can just create your stuff around the object and the model that you've made, which is it's free to do, and it's so cheap and easy to make these digital twins now. I find it very impressive. Yeah, I mean, both Apple and Meta, they give out their free digital systems now. They're all available on Figma. So really, I've got no excuse really to kind of start building out my design. So you can actually just use their design systems, start building out your own apps, import them into some like shapes, which then you can obviously tweak around with, rebrand if you like, reskin them. Then you can, just import them into Unity, and then you pretty much halfway there to kind of building your own app, really. So all of this stuff's out there now to kind of, you can build sort of fictitious, I'm really getting in the habit now of just coming up with ideas, building them, sticking them in my portfolio. You've got no real excuses now not to do so. 5-10 years ago, this was just so difficult to do now, but the software is just advancing day by day. So what does all this mean for brands, really? I mean, I don't know if, I don't know if you've ever come across the kind of the sort of rubber hand and hammer illusion, where you pretend to somebody that they've got a rubber hand, you take the real hand, you take it out of the way, and then you hit the rubber hand with the hammer, and they think that you're hitting their hand. Well, that's the same principles as what XR uses. And that's been a huge improvement for training programs and for the healthcare. It's just, it's helped their sectors immensely. And, I'm pretty sure marketeers and advertisers are going to just jump on that same sort of bandwagon and saying, once they start understanding that sort of principles, kind of start using it a lot more. And, I've got a little video here again, just to sort of demonstrate, shapes like stars.
This lesson is called "You Are the Interface," meaning in screen design, you are you, or like when you're playing a video game, you're watching something happen on the screen, and it doesn't feel like it's happening to you, but in XR, you are present with the objects and the environment around you. It feels in your body, in your brain, like I'm standing here right in front of you, right? As I get closer to you, it might feel a little uncomfortable if I get too close, because your brain gets tricked in believing that we are actually in the same space. When you're interacting with the screen, your brain thinks the screen is the object in the space, not the other person. So there's lots of implications to this. So one implication is that memories in XR, people say are more intense than memories playing video games or on a phone or those, because you get a sense of spatial memory with these things. I remember one time I was playing on the HoloLens this app called Figments. It's like a game where, you know, somebody's killed and you have to go try to figure out the clues to solve the murder and do forensic analysis. And there was a rat that in AR went across in my kitchen. And I had this visceral response because there was a rat in my kitchen. I knew it wasn't really there, but in my brain, I was like, there's a rat in the kitchen. And I really distinctly remember exactly where that was, which doesn't happen on a video game. So the reason I bring this up is because you just have to be careful and kind of use your power wisely. So if you're giving someone an experience or a memory, it can be a visceral negative reaction or a very positive reaction, or it can help increase the kind of stickiness of learning, which is why I'm actually teaching this class in VR here, where you can experience these concepts firsthand.
So anyhow, you know, just to conclude everything, I mean, I've got some examples of various projects that brands have done. You know, I've got 2 AR examples here. The first one's from IKEA.
Hey, IKEA would like everyone to know about Place, our new augmented reality app. Built on Apple's new AR kit, you can easily place true to scale 3D models of IKEA furniture in your place. Scan, browse, select, move, and place. So that could mean less of this. And less of this. And probably more of this. We want to make it easier for people everywhere to imagine a better place. Share this place. And this place. Try Place in your place.
Yeah, this dice mode's a little bit gimmicky. It's just come out over the last week or 2. I've got 2 VR examples.
Merrell is launching their newest, most advanced hiking shoe, the Capra. So how do we show people the extreme places this new killer shoe can take them in a new and exciting way? By taking over the Sundance Film Festival with the very first Oculus Rift virtual reality experience that uses motion capture technology, so the user is able to walk around in a virtual world.
Welcome to the Dolomite. Once that mist clears, head down the bridge.
It's a virtual reality experience with a difference. So we've done quite a few virtual reality experiences before, but we've never had a client brave enough to do a walk around one.
Make sure you stop at the end and take in that view.
What you'll be doing is taking a virtual hike in the Dolomites in Italy, and you'll be going across a particularly wobbly rope bridge.
Whoa!
And then there might be some sort of landslide. And then you might need to find your way to the summit of a mountain.
How am I scared in a little hallway, and yet it's unbelievable.
It was wild, man. It was wild.
So it's a virtual reality headset like there are many out there already, but the difference being this time is that we're using a motion capture system. So there's an OptiTrack motion capture system in the entire space. So not only do you have the ability to look around at whatever you like, you can also be tracked in that space. So wherever you go, we can simulate your view inside our technology.
That was awesome. It was really cool.
4D elements like the bridge, wind, and the ground shaking made the experience feel even more lifelike. People were amazed,
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
way cooler than I was expecting.
It was the most amazing thing ever.
terrified,
I'm still walking like this.
Literally felt like I was like,
It's pretty intense.
But actually moving through that space, it's just, there's no other feeling like it.
speechless,
yeah, okay.
Holy cow.
and most importantly, it made them want to get outside and do it for real.
Later, guys. Thanks.
Yes, one from Top Shop.
The brief was to open up Topshop's fashion show at London Fashion Week, which was taking place in the Turbine Hall in Tate Modern, to a much wider audience. And the idea we came back with was to use virtual reality to let people attend the show using a thing called telepresence. So we actually transmitted the show from a front row seat in the Turbine Hall to 5 Oculus Rift virtual reality headsets, which were in the front window of Topshop's flagship store in Oxford Street. And then for 3 days afterwards, we switched to an on-demand system where people could watch the show as live and have a very similar experience. So the idea was to bring together as many possible strands of content into one Topshop space. And Stabby's going to demonstrate here what they could see. So just put the Oculus Rift headset on, and we also had stereo sound, which was positional as well. So as you move your head around, you actually get a sense of sound in the 3D space. So the front row here, you can see we have this 180-degree view of the front row. You can see people sitting next to you to the left and right. You can see celebs across, and obviously you can see the girls walking along the catwalk. And if we look behind, we've got this secondary screen. So at the moment, this is showing a time lapse of the set build. But by simply looking at the switch below, we can actually select the backstage live view as well. Another full HD feed that we had coming through. If you look up, right up into the gap in the top of the roof, you actually float up into the second space. And this is one of the 360 still images that was taken, the 360 selfie there. And this is a slideshow that moves through images, and these were coming in live during the event. And if Stabby looks back down to where she came from, in the hole in the floor, she'll float back down into the original room. Now this room was designed not only to reflect the aesthetics of the Tate Modern, but also to reflect the themes of the autumn-winter show. So we have a crow here that flies around every time a tweet comes in, and drops an autumnal leaf, and on the leaf is actually written a live tweet. To create a finale for the show, we created quite a dramatic end sequence involving a flock of crows that circle around you. So I'll actually trigger that now. So actually got dozens and dozens of crows, and the effect is quite startling as they fly really, really close to your face and circle you, create a nice closing moment. So we had several hundred people through in the 4 days it was open to the public, and Topshop were absolutely delighted with the response. To give people an inkling of what it was like to be sat at the front row of their fashion show was amazing, and the talk was all about the experience and not about the technology, which is exactly what we were hoping for. Only just been possible to do projects like this with headsets like the Oculus Rift coming to market, and we're obviously very excited about the next stage. This technology is going to move on dramatically in the next 6 to 12 months. The experience and the possibilities with it are just going to explode. I think the potential for doing telepresence type experience where you can put people at events that they couldn't otherwise attend is an amazing use of this technology, and we look forward to loads more projects in that vein.
Right, okay, so that's more or less it, really. Hope you've enjoyed my deck.
Amazing. Thanks very much, Neville. Mate, I've got some questions
Sure.
straight in, but I think it's fascinating. We're living in a very fascinating time, and I think some of this change is happening already, and much more is coming, isn't it? So,
Yeah, no,
what
absolutely.
I might get you to do, mate, is I might get you to just stop sharing your screen, and then we'll get you back big for those at home. In terms of the questions, yeah, I'll kick things off. As I say, I've got quite a few, but if anyone does have any questions, obviously feel free to put them into the Q&A. You've obviously, as you mentioned at the start there, 30 years working in design in a variety of roles. What do you think, or can you share any insights on the key challenges that people might face, traditional 2D designers might face when transitioning to XR and spatial design? And I guess adding to that, as a 2D designer, you perhaps have certain foundational skills. Presumably some of those translate well to 3D design. So could you tell us a bit more about how you found it in this sort of transition phase that you've been going through?
Yeah, I think possibly the most difficult thing about it, I guess, is just understanding the technology. There's just a sheer kind of, I suppose when you first start off and first start analyzing it, so I tried to get across on that sort of software matrix. There's just a ton of stuff that and it appears to be a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
But then if you just break it down into what you're actually doing, you're designing, you're doing the UI, or you're doing the coding to it. So, it simplifies it. And it's, then you kind of just pick out which piece of software is probably the easiest to use or the most popular around. And so, yeah, it's just kind of getting your head around all the technology and just kind of breaking this kind of, for years, I've just never really took up learning 3D, for example. But then I just thought, oh God, it's just a huge craft in itself. I don't really want to do. But then I kind of forced myself to learn it. And you're going into Unity, building stuff out in 3D, going into blending, building, and I actually just really enjoyed it. And it was actually not as hard as what I thought.
Okay.
So it's a case of just jumping in there and getting your hands dirty with the software.
Okay.
And playing around and trying to do best to enjoy it while you're doing it.
Mate, sounds great. Sounds a little bit like, as you say, make a start and see where you go. I must admit, as you were going through a number of the platforms and technologies that are available and that you've worked with, it was a little bit daunting almost, as you mentioned, and I was a bit like, God, where would you start? So, if there was one or two pieces of software, you've mentioned Unity, is that where, if there's 2D designers watching this thinking, God, where do I start? What one or two things would you kind of say to them, do this first and then go from there?
Yeah, I think, you're looking at the jobs around at the moment, for sure, Unity or Unreal. I think Unity is the most popular at the moment. You've got to have at least a certain exposure to Unity. Because the game engine is just the backbone of VR app.
Okay.
Second to that, I would just start experimenting. I love using Shapes XR, and it's really easy to use. It's quite fun to use. So just get yourself a headset. I mean, like I didn't mention in the deck, but there's a Google Cardboard VR. It's only 10 quid. A lot of people still use them, so it's not really a cost issue, really. I mean, the price of headsets now are 199 quid for the Quest 2. So, to get a headset and start using things like Gravity Sketch. I love using that. Shapes XR, I love using that. Just jump in there.
Jump in. Sounds good. I love a gadget, so I don't need much. I don't need much excuse to go out and buy something. So I'll maybe do that myself. So. One of the other things that I was thinking as you were presenting, though, was around design principles. As I mentioned, you've worked in the past in photography and digital design. Excuse me. How do design principles differ when applied to XR versus traditional media? Do they differ in terms of sort of core principles?
Yeah, funny enough, I was talking about this the other night in one of the groups, sort of immersive groups I'm part of. But originally I started off as a photojournalist, and that kind of ability to kind of storytell through photojournalism, it was it kind of really kind of resonated when I put the headset on, because once you've got like I explained at the end, you just got this kind of really captivated, immersive experience, and so the ability to kind of tell stories through that is much more intense than a 2D experience. So it resonated with my photography days, the ability to just tell stories, whether it's a social story or whether it's to sell a brand.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff. I'm going to jump to a question that's coming from Paul. So thanks for pinging that question over, Paul. Paul says, hello. It's always a good way to start. Thanks, Paul. For independent creators and small studios, how would one go about offering spatial design as a service? What kinds of industries or companies would find this tech useful? And how would you approach putting together a value proposition? So Paul is looking for some business tips, which I've got a lot of time for.
Good question. I'd say the first companies to, training companies now that have really taken to it, so training sectors, any educational or training sectors, definitely worth a phone call. Build up a portfolio of work examples and then just contact companies. I don't think the sort of, I'll give a few examples at the end of my deck. Brands haven't really taken onto it yet, as much as what the training sectors have, medical sectors. But it's only a matter of time before it goes kind of more mainstream.
Yeah, I feel like there's, as you talked about a bit with and we were talking beforehand actually with Ray-Ban, with the glasses, and it's that combination of technology, but also practicality and fashion and stuff like that. And there perhaps may be some tipping point where, these become a bit more mainstream, or there's a certain number of users that have these, which then turns the brands to it. Do you think? Or
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that a lot of people have been saying that the tipping point is getting something that's actually wearable, that you can actually go out and sort of wear. Nobody's going to go down Tesco's with a big headset on the face.
Yeah.
But having a sort of wearable pair of sunglasses you can just stick on and just walk around the aisle of the supermarket and see all the sort of all the AR content buzzing out to you. Well, that's probably quite practical, and that's probably they say it's probably about a year or two away now.
Yeah.
Meta and Apple are already talking about launching glasses, AR glasses.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess the good thing for people in the space now is that, it's coming, and you've got a couple of years to get yourself into that sort of a leader in the field potentially. You're going to be ahead of the curve, talking about jobs and talking about opportunities and things like that. You might be ahead of things.
Absolutely. I mean, if you compare, often compare it to the .com boom and bust, the bubble, because I lived through that, and there isn't as much money around now, to be fair, for marketing companies to have big budgets. So it has to be kind of money well spent.
Yeah.
But there's a steady growth rather than a big boom, rather than just investment companies just investing in it for the sake of investing in something.
Yeah.
There's just a nice steady growth at the moment, to be fair.
Amazing. Yep, sounds good. The other thing that you touched on in your presentation there was sort of GUI versus NUI. Am I saying that right? Natural user interface. So is it a NUI? Yeah. We'll go with NUI.
Yeah.
I must admit I didn't actually put a name to it, but obviously I've been aware through technology that I'm using that there is a shift to voice. There's a shift to using your hands, using your eyes, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of that shift, can you speak a bit more to what that shift means from a user experience and interactive design perspective? Is it a big shift?
I mean, Apple would probably say that it isn't a big shift because it's kind of intuitive, or to a user's perspective, to a consumer's perspective, there isn't that big shift because it's kind of intuitive. I haven't actually tried the Apple headset, but apparently the eye gaze is very, very effective. So yeah, that there is going to be that big shift. I mean, I think it's definitely going to be just hands. Pinch is going to be, it's going to be much more prevalent over the next sort of few years, as well as, I suppose the Apple headset's a real kind of testing the waters, really, for the eye gaze.
Amazing. So sounds good. I've got a couple more questions that I was hoping to fire through. So I was keen to talk a little bit more about the practical applications, and then, if possible, finish up with talking a bit about sort of skills gaps, and maybe speak a little bit to future trends and kind of draw things to a close from there. Obviously, you talked about practical applications. You've already called out training as a big opportunity and stuff like that. If we were going to kind of push you and say, okay, where else can you see this, make an impact? Could we push you further?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is it'll impact every sector. I mean, every sector is going to be sort of impacted by the AI somewhere along the line. Everybody's quite within the community. We're all excited. We'll see what big ideas are going to really stick.
Yeah,
these big sticky ideas. I mean, there isn't that much. I highlighted IKEA because furniture is one area where all the furniture companies now are starting to get into the AR, because it just makes so much sense to kind of just to kind of go in your own front room and sort of obviously see the product live in situ.
Yeah.
So anything like that, I would say that the big area that's probably going to be the first one to sort of really go mainstream is web AR, because it's used on the mobile phone, which is everybody's the world still orientates around the mobile phone. And you don't need special software for it. It's just on a browser. So that's electronic communications and electronic marketing. It's going to use web AR a lot more than it does now, for sure.
Yeah, amazing. I think I saw one crazy example. It was that someone had got an Apple Vision headset and they were watching sport on a big screen in their living room, but they had the glasses on, and then within the sort of virtual reality world, they had real-time analytics for the players, and they almost had the pitch marked out in front of them, and you could see where players were positioned on the pitch, and it was like this whole interactive immersive experience mixed with what they were actually watching on their TV. So like stuff like that, I was thinking, this is cool,
so intense and so captivating as well when you're watching it,
at your fingertips.
No, absolutely.
Amazing stuff. We've jumped onto the future trends, so we can perhaps tick that one off. So I'll perhaps draw things to
I would say web AR is definitely a future trend.
Yeah.
But people, within sort of, like I say, I tend to work with big blue chip brands. I don't see any obvious trends now. I was speaking to some guys in America, and I says, come on, like surely the States is sort of a good 6 months ahead of us. Do you see any big trends? And they say, no, we still don't see any, but it'll come.
It'll come. Yeah, for sure. Exciting. I'm going to draw things to a close. I think talking about, skills gap potentially, I'm assuming people that are watching this will watch this back on YouTube or whatever, maybe going to be thinking, okay, overcoming the skills gap. Obviously, this area of technology is rapidly developing. There is potentially a skills gap in that industry. Do you have any strategies that you would suggest for professionals or companies to kind of overcome that challenge? I know you talked a bit earlier about kind of just get stuck in and start doing it, but is there anything that you would particularly recommend in terms of that skills gap to market themselves to these companies?
I mean, one thing I didn't mention actually in the deck very much is, if you look at this sort of, metaverse in general, it's just so, or Web 3.0, it's just so big, the amount of kind of labor that will have to build it. Obviously AI is a crucial part of that. It's they say, that's the reason why Web 3.0 probably happened, is because it, coincides with the hardware, and the, AI is going to help them build that. So, whatever you want, avenue you go down, so you want to be a 3D creator, is understand all the sort of, the AI tools around there, because you're going to have to start using them. We can't sort of stick our heads in the sand. And,
these are AI tools specifically for creating video and creating life-like environments type things.
If you're a 3D creator, you're going to have to start getting familiar with all the AI tools that are around to create 3D. If you're sort of, if you're a UX designer, you're going to have to start getting, familiar with their set
Yeah.
of AI tools.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just vast the amount that's around there. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be part of our tool set then. Moving
Amazing.
forward.
Yeah. Never a dull day, is there, at the moment? It's
Yeah.
like, when do we stop learning? I'm
Yeah.
tired. I'm
I mean,
tired.
I think the whole tech industry at this moment in time is going through a kind of learning phase and sort of,
Yeah.
not quite sure what's around the corner, but there's still so much to learn.
Yeah. Agreed, man. Agreed. Exciting times all round, and it's good to be part of it, isn't it? It's good to be part
absolutely.
of it. I will draw things to a close now. I'm going to end with a massive thank you, actually, Nevil.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's a budding area, growing area. It's been really interesting to have you come and share your experiences over the last 2, 3, 4 years, where you've been digging more and more into it. And I think you've definitely going to given people a starting point to kind of get out there and start working in it. So how did you find today's session? Have you enjoyed gathering your thoughts and putting them into a deck and stuff? Or
yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed sort of just putting it all into one deck. It's the first presentation I've ever done, so I'm quite sort of it was quite exciting, and I was a little bit nervous, to be honest. But so.
You're a seasoned pro. if you hadn't just confessed to that, I don't think anyone would have known, mate. So yeah, we really appreciate it personally, and also as a community. So it's been great fun. I did mention before we started the webinar, I'll keep talking about it, but we hopefully will be able to get something in person at some point, and it'd be really nice. So we'll maybe try and make all of this sort of stuff happen. So yeah, thank you from me, thank you from the community.
You're welcome.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and hope you have a great afternoon, and I look forward to catching you all again very soon.
All right, cheers, thanks.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.